It was made for troops far away from the front to shoot Soviet paratroopers when things went sideways. However, it ended up being used almost exclusively by special operators. The bullet it fired was made from the ground up and could penetrate armor like it was nothing. You've already seen it in many movies and probably have played with it in your favorite video game. Today, we're looking at the P90 space gun. Stick around to find out. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dennis at the Range. Today we're gonna be talking about the P90. We're gonna briefly talk about the story of FN, the P90 and the crazy ammo this gun fires. If you've seen the past videos on the channel, I have a macro lens now, so we're gonna look at all the details of this gun really close. For those who are new on the channel, I'm French. I like guns, so I made this channel to show you guns. I also have an Instagram at Dennis at the Range, so make sure to follow me over there too. Now let's get to the video. It all started back in 1889 in the town of Herstal in Belgium. Around a dozen local arms makers, with Henri Piper as their main guy, banded together to create what they called the Fabrique Nationale d'Armes de Guerre, basically the national factory for weapons of war. The Belgian government had ordered 150,000 Muzzle Model 89 rifle, and none of the small shops could handle that kind of volume on their own. So they got together, got some technical help from a German outfit to set up the plant, and the first rifles started coming off of the line on New Year's Eve 1891. That contract was the spark, but they weren't dumb enough to pin everything on military orders that might dry up. So pretty quick, they started making ammunition, and they even branched into bicycles to keep the machines running during the slow times. That bicycle move turned out to be genius. In 1897, their sales manager headed over to the US to check some bike technology and ended up meeting the guy named John Moses Browning.
He's the GOAT! The GOAT!
This turns into one of the most legendary partnerships in firearms history. I'm interrupting this video to talk to you about CNP Tir. CNP Tir is a gun shop in Tours, which is about 3 hours away from Paris, and they're the gun shop that lent me most of the pieces that are in the channel. They are the first ones to believe fully in Dennis at the Range, so I really have to thank them a lot for that, and I'm really grateful. They just lend me the guns, I do whatever I want with them, and then I give them back. They have absolutely everything, and I was very surprised when I walked in and I saw all that there is here. They have all the latest things that come out from the industry, and they also have a bunch of old vintage rifles with a lot of history. They truly are a one-stop shop for anything related to firearms. I am right now in their vault, and you can see there's just everything. So again, thank you very much to CNP. Now let's get to the video. Browning starts designing for them the Model 1900 pocket pistol, then the Model 1910, which, fun or tragic fact, was the gun that was used in the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Then they rolled out the Auto 5 shotgun, which I did on the channel that you can see right here, the superposed over-under, the BAR, and a bunch of other classics. Throughout the World Wars, things got intense. The factory cranked out weapons for Belgium and its allies, took some hits during the fighting, but they eventually rebuilt after World War II. Sev and the team picked right up where they left off, designing the FAL battle rifle in the early 50s, then they came the MAG machine gun in the late 50s, which today is the M240 in the US service. They did the Mini-Me light machine gun, which was turned by the US military in the M249 SAW, the P90 that we have right here, the SCAR, the 5.7, on and on and on. Today, FN equips armies in over 100 countries. There's still a lot more to this company, but this is a video on the P90, so let's move on. Before we talk about the P90, we need to talk about its weird ammunition. The P90 doesn't shoot 9mm or anything normal. It uses the 5.7 by 28mm cartridge that FN created just for this gun. Back in the late 80s, NATO wanted a round that could punch through body armor, have low recoil so it could be controlled on full auto, and still be light enough that you could carry a ton of it. FN, more specifically a couple of their engineers named Jean-Paul Denis and Marc Neforge, designed the whole thing from scratch. The first version of the 5.7 was called the SS90, and it came out in 1990. It was crazy fast, but they ended up shortening it in 1993 to the SS190, so it would also work with the FN 5.7 pistol that they had recently designed. The casing is totally straight, and you can see that being translated into the magazine, because the magazine is straight. But we'll dive deeper into the magazine a little later. So most rounds are tapered, so even 5.56, which looks kind of straight, has some taper to it. And since this one is straight walled, there were some extraction issues. So this bullet is lightly coated with a polymer lubrication. Compared to 9mm, this bullet is super light. The whole cartridge weighs about only 2/3 of what a 9mm does. Recoil is also less by about 30%, and the trajectory is super flat. And most importantly, when it hits soft tissue, it tumbles, which makes a huge wound channel without needing expanding bullets. Obviously, it was made to go through armor, so it will go through a Chrysat vest or a level 3A vest at 200 meters. Today, there's a bunch of different loads. Military guys get the armor-piercing SS-190 and some tracers, while civilian gets stuff like the SS-195LF, which is lead-free hollow point, or the SS-197SR with a VMAX bullet. Since it is quite a very cool cartridge, other manufacturers have created their own versions for the 5.7. There is the AR-57, which is an upper receiver for AR platforms that can take P90 mags. CMMG has some AR-style pistols in 5.7 too, with their Banshee line. There's the Ruger 5.7, then we have Keltec with the PR-57 and their KP-50, which I saw when I was at IWA in Germany. There's also a cool manufacturer that we don't really have here in Europe, which is Palmetto State Armory, and they have their PSA Rock 5.7. And another manufacturer which I wish we could see more here in Europe is Smith & Wesson with their M&P 5.7. Okay. We went over the history of FN, then we went over the cartridge. Now let's look at this gun. Back then, the big worry floating around NATO was that body armor was getting way better, especially the kind that the Soviets were supposed to be handing out to their paratroopers. This meant that regular 9mm pistols and submachine guns that were carried by rear-echelon troops could not punch through armor anymore. Troops like tank crews, truck drivers, pilots, artillery guys who aren't frontline infantry but might suddenly need something serious when they have Soviet paratroopers landing on their positions could not rely on the 9mm anymore. So NATO started floating the idea of a whole new personal defense weapon. They were looking for a compact shoulder-fired gun and a matching pistol, both chambered in the same cartridge, and that cartridge had to be small, fast, low recoil, and armor piercing. So FN didn't really wait for the official paperwork, because in 1986 they jumped straight in with what they internally called the Project 9.0. The 5.7 cartridge came before the P90, that we have to say. Then they wanted a gun that was tiny enough to carry all day in a cockpit or in a vehicle cab. It needed to hold a ton of ammo, and it could be shot equally well, left-handed or right-handed, by anyone with zero training. The first prototype actually fired in October of 1986. They tinkered through with some pretty weird early versions, which we're not really gonna go through, but they announced the whole thing publicly in 1988. And by 1990, the first production guns rolled out. They threw in fully ambidextrous controls, downward ejections so you don't get brass in your face. There was an integrated reflex sight, and it was a simple blowback action. The whole thing weighs less than 3 kilograms, which is about 6.6 pounds, loaded. It measures 20 inches or 50 centimeters long. NATO did eventually run formal trials in 2002 and 2003, pitting the P90 with its 5.7 cartridge against the HK MP7s and its 4.5mm round. Between both guns and both cartridges, we're talking about marginal wins on each side. Both are great cartridges, but it came a little bit more towards the FN and the 5.7 side. So despite the recommendation to standardize a 5.7 by 28, Germany rejected the results.
Are you crying? Are you crying?
The entire project was stopped. So for nearly 20 years, NATO had no official PDW standard. This meant that countries could just buy whichever one they preferred. It took until 2021 for NATO to finally standardize both the 5.7 and the 4.6. And it was initially made for rear-echelon troops. However, special forces and counter-terror units from all over the world snatched it up. The French GIGN, which I will always say are the unit with the best style, used this one. Then we have the Peruvian commandos that used suppressed P90s to end the Japanese embassy hostage crisis in 1997. The US Secret Service is a big user of this one. And then we have Thai, Indonesian special units, you name it. This gun is everywhere. With time, FN kept evolving it. They added Picatinny rails in the TR model in 1999, and they released the semi-auto version, which is the PS90 for civilians, in 2005. The gun is still in production today, and it looks exactly like it did in the 1990s, because I mean, FN did it right the first time. It is a very cool suppressor host. Just make sure you test it, because if you have a can that has a lot of back pressure, there might be some instances where it unsits your magazines due to the gas coming back into the barrel. let's talk a little bit about the impact on popular culture that the P90 had, because this gun is basically everywhere. It has appeared alongside James Bond in GoldenEye 007 on the Nintendo 64. It also did it on The World Is Not Enough, Tomorrow Never Dies. It was accompanying James Bond all around the world. But the most iconic showing of this gun was in Stargate SG-1. However, it also appeared in Doctor Who, in iRobot, Incredible Hulk, Hitman, Hunger Games, everywhere. This gun was everywhere in the movies and series. Where I saw it was obviously in video games. I used it extensively in different video games such as Counter-Strikes, mostly Call of Duties.
What the f*** is this piece of shit?
Battlefield, Payday 2, Rainbow Six Siege. This gun is everywhere and it was super fun to use. Enough talking, let's look at the gun from tip to butt. Let's go from tip to butt. In the front we have this muzzle device which has been cut diagonally, and it's used as a flash suppressor and a little bit of a compensator because there's 4 holes over here at the top, and the diagonal cut makes the gases go a little bit upwards, kind of like what the AK has. Then we have the barrel. So the barrel is a Colt Hammer Forge chrome-lined 10.4-inch barrel. The sighting system that this one has is a Holosun green dot that has been put on top. However, there is 3 small emergency iron sights in this one. The first one would be here on this side. The second one would be right here on this side too, so you have the back part and the front part. And the third one is one that is in this small hole right here, and there's the other piece right over here, you can see. Some other versions of the P90 have reflex sights that are going to be in the place of this Picatinny rail, but this one just has the Pic rail, so for you to put a Holosun. The reason why they didn't really bother with putting proper iron sights is because there's a very short sight radius over here, so you're not going to be really accurate, so might as well just put an optic. Then going down, we have over here the charging handle, which again is ambidextrous. I took out the magazine because we're going to talk about that later, but looking at the charging handle, we see here the mechanism of the P90. So this is where the feeding hole would go. Our barrel begins here. Then we have the handguard, which is a place for you to put your thumb in here, and then you would put your other hand here. So your left thumb or right thumb, your opposite hand thumb, is gonna be right next to your index. FN actually added this little stop because you don't want your hand slipping up and being in front of the barrel. Then right next to that, we have the safety, which is a simple rotating disc. Normally it would be a 3-position switch, but this is a civilian version, so it's only 2 positions.
Boring!
There's safe with S and 1. There's just 1. If this had the full semi-auto fun mode, it would be an A for automatic. There's also a built-in drop safety, so it doesn't do what the P320 does. The trigger is about 7 to 8 pounds, so let's pull. And now let's look at the reset. Slowly. Okay, so honestly, it's not too bad. On the full semi-auto version, when you put it in A, which is the continuous firing mode, if you catch my drift, the first trigger, small trigger pull is gonna be 1 round, and if you keep on pulling, it's gonna be fun mode. This is very similar to the Steyr AUG, which when you put it again in the same mode, you pull once and it's like a single shot, and if you keep on pulling, it's gonna let go of all the 50. Before looking at the magazine, we need to see how it gets released. It is ambidextrous. You can do on this side or on this side, but you see that there's a small tab that's gonna get pulled backwards. And to seat your magazine, you're gonna slide it in.
That's what she said!
And once it's here, just smack it. And it's in. Let's talk about our magazine. So the idea for this magazine was originated by the American inventor that was named John L. Hill, and John made the Hill H15 SMG. It had the same concept of turning the rounds 90 degrees. However, it wasn't really fully reliable because it used a mechanism inside of the gun to turn the bullets around, and it was fed by gravity. It was kind of weird. So it never gained traction. So FN saw his expired patents and made it better. More specifically, the engineer called René Predatzer, instead of relying on a mechanical component inside of the firearm, René decided to create the mechanism inside the magazine. This meant that the magazine did all the work of turning the bullet and not the gun, which made it even more reliable. Here I have some dummy rounds of 5.7. You basically press down and push, and you're gonna see how the bullet is gonna rotate when I push the other one in. So when I push it down, the other one should be spinning around. And with each round that I add, they're gonna turn and align themselves. As I mentioned before, this casing is made straight walled, so it will go straight into this magazine. And it's a little bit tapered down, with the rim being smaller than the thing over here. And there's also this polymer coating on the bullet that's gonna make it slide. And there's also a coating inside of the magazine, which is kind of like a dry lubricant, that's gonna help the shells slide and rotate a lot easier. So if you do a deep clean on the P90 mag and you take out that solvent, it can lead to some reliability issues. So we can see right here how the bullets come in horizontally and they end up twisting, and they are vertical right here. So it's quite funny, it's very interesting, it's a lot of fun, and it's super effective because this is a totally YouTube compliant magazine. But normally the regular P90 mag is a magazine that's in its 50s, if you catch my drift. This one is not, this is a YouTube compliant magazine. We talked about how the shells are fed right here by being pulled down, but the ejection is also quite smart because the ejection port is right over here. So the bullets, when you're prone, they're gonna come down, they're not really gonna bother you. And since it's going down, you can shoot it from left or right because you won't have casings on your face, which some bullpups can be quite annoying. I know the FAMAS, for example, can be interchanged, but you need to take it apart. This one, you don't really care because casings are just gonna fall down. There's this dust cover right here that you can lock, and once the bolt comes back, it opens. Okay. So how do you field strip this gun and how do you disassemble? Because there's still a little bit more magic in the buttstock. Well, you take your magazine out, you make sure that the gun is clear, and you push this button right here. This button is going to allow you to pull what would be considered as the upper receiver over here. So let's take a look at that first. You can see that there's some springs right here, which are the ones that are going to make your charging handle go back. Nothing too special about that. Here is your chamber. This is the barrel right here. This part is the metal part. The rest is just pure polymer. Now let's look at the lower receiver. Now that we have the lower receiver here, we can take out the bolt, which is gonna come out from the front. This bolt right here actually has dual recoil springs, which are gonna be the ones that are gonna connect right here. If you see. So this is how the gun would function normally. This mechanism is a simple blowback gun since it doesn't really have a lot of pressure. What's gonna lock it is the pressure from the bolt and the springs. This little part over here that moves is called a dead blow weight, so there's no bolt bounce. What the dead blow hammer does is that when you're firing in full semi-automatic fashion, there might be sometimes a little bit of bolt bounce. So it means that you chamber around and it's gonna bounce by even a small amount. The problem with this is that if it bounces, the hammer is not going to be able to strike the firing pin in the back and it can induce malfunctions. This solves it because when the gun is pushed back, it's going to go back like that. And when the bolt slams, this small weight is going to move forward and it's going to lock that bolt so you don't have bolt bounce. So FN calls it the firing rate stabilizer, but it's basically a dead bolt weight. And right below we have our little extractor. Now let's look at the stock, because if you see, when this is sitting back right here, there's a small pin. What this pin does is it blocks this thing from coming out. You see when it's inside the gun, it's like that. Here in the back we have the fire control unit, which you have to pull down with this spring over here, and it should come right out. We see this is basically the trigger. So when you fire, the trigger has these two bars that move right here. These trigger bars are gonna be coming out the back and they're gonna be connecting right here in this way. So I'm gonna put the hammer down, the trigger's gonna pull back like that, and it's gonna release your hammer, which in this case is made of polymer. This is the hammer when it hits the firing pin. The bolt is gonna come back, it's gonna pull your hammer down, lock it again. There's this small safety right here, which is gonna stop your hammer from going again if your gun is not in battery. So if I release the trigger right here, you can see that the hammer is not hitting because there's this small piece over here. And if the bolt is not in battery, it's not gonna hit. When the bolt's in battery, it's gonna push this down and it's gonna allow your hammer to go all the way. So here, out of battery, bolt's in battery, and it's gonna hit. Here's your P90 fully disassembled. Thank you CNP for giving me access to this gun and allowing me the possibility of looking at it in detail and showing it to you guys. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to leave your thoughts below on the comments. Quick reminder to follow me on Instagram, and until the next one, Dennis out.